Ladies and gentlemen, scoundrels of all ages, welcome back to Modern Weekly. Today on the docket, we have Hardened Scales versus Izzet Murktide. Two of the best decks in the format. Hardened Scales, of course, looking to win by putting multiple counters on a creature either through Arcbound Ravager, the Ozolith Hardened Scales, and recently printed Agatha Soul Cauldron to win the game, sometimes in one shot if they move them all over to an Inkmoth Nexus. And of course, Izzet Murktide, the tempo deck of the format, which usually wins with Murktide Regent. Starting the game here, we have Hardened Scales for the Hardened Scales player. There is a Preordain for the Murktide player. Mishra's Bauble looking at the top card of the Scales player, drawing in their upkeep. Inkmoth Nexus into Patchwork Automaton. Tough card to remove for the Murktide player. Land for turn for Murktide here. Into another Preordain. Preordain, of course, a card that was just unbanned in the modern format. Tough decision here. Looks like we're tapping two. No, just tapping one. Ancient Stirrings being cast. Finding the forest there. Casting the Agatha Soul Cauldron. Patchwork triggering, putting a counter on it. Alright, casting the Walking Ballista for 0. Eating the Walking Ballista under the Agatha Soul Cauldron, putting another counter onto the Patchwork. Of course, these counters have been doubled up thanks to the Hardened Scales on the field. Looks like we have a 7/7 Patchwork. And the Murktide player scoops it up. Sometimes the Patchwork Automaton having Ward 2 and becoming a 7/7 that quickly is just a little bit too much to deal with. Sideboarding decisions being made here. Wouldn't be surprised if we have Brotherhood's End come in, sometimes Blood Moon, specifically for turning off their lands that can kind of take over and win the game themselves, and Urza Saga, as well as Inkmoth Nexus. Engineered Explosives also an option here. The Hardened Scales player probably bringing in Pithing Needle if they haven't already. Of course, thank you guys so much for watching our videos. In the timestamps below, you'll find the next game And we have this in all of our videos. To be able to move from game to game quickly. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe. We're blessed here on the channel to have many people who play different decks in our meta, and thus bringing you gameplay of some of the best decks in the format, as well as some of the most fun decks in the format. Will here, the Murktide player, was looking at possibly bringing this deck to the RC that he qualified for in Denver. At least his second RC he's qualified for. And Alex is a beloved artifact player here in the meta. Whether it's Affinity in some form with Urza or Hardened Scales. Alright, looks like we're shuffling up here. Soon to make mulligan decisions and move into game number 2. Of course, it'll be interesting to see how these decks perform moving forward. Oh, looks like pre-game action. With the Gemstone Caverns. Looks like putting a land away. Drawing for turn after the land is played here for the Murktide player into an Inkmoth Nexus. Into the Hardened Scales. Another great start there for the Hardened Scales player. Murktide fetching for one of the new Surveil lands, which I think is going to be one of the mainstays of the format in terms of a one-of for multiple decks, whether it's Teamer Murktide, or Izzet Murktide, excuse me, the Teamer version of Cascade Rhinos as well. Island for turn here. Looks like into an Engineered Explosives for 1. Pithing Needle here, naming Engineered Explosives. Steam Vent sending it to 20 to 17, and there is the Blood Moon. 2 mana, Walking Ballista for 2 thanks to the Hardened Scales. Preordain for the Murktide player. Passing the turn. forest for the Scales player here. And there is Zabaz. All on the stack. Looks like we're going to have an Unholy Heat targeting the Walking Ballista, dealing 2 damage to the Murktide player in response by activating the Walking Ballista. There's the Arcbound Ravager. Unholy Heat in response, killing the Zabaz. Looks like the Arcbound Ravager gained the counter from the Hardened Scales, putting it up to 2. There's an Unholy Heat to kill the Ravager. There is the Ozolith, one of the strongest cards for the Scales player. Into an Arcbound Ravager. Looks like bolting the Arcbound Ravager. Both counters going on to the Ozolith. Then we have a Mountain for turn. Thanks to the Blood Moon. Oh, and there is another Patchwork Automaton. Oh, and there is the Bolt before going into combat to avoid the Ozolith, having the mana to target the Ward 2 on the Patchwork Automaton. So far, the Murktide player has had an answer for all the threats. And there is the Walking Ballista for 2, going up to 3 from the Hardened Scales. Ozolith putting on the 2 counters onto the Walking Ballista. And then the Hardened Scales adding another. Oh, there's the Brotherhood's End. Alright, in response, activating the Walking Ballista, dealing 6 damage to the Murktide player, sending it to 20-9, and then killing all the artifacts. There's a pass of the turn, and then the Hangerback Walker Bane cast here with 3 counters on it. Moving to combat, attacking for 3. Putting us at 20-6. Hangerback Walker attacking for 3. 20-3 now. There's the Bauble and the Concede. Heck of a match there. Just wasn't quite enough. Ultimately, this Murktide player was stuck under its own Blood Moon with double blue cards in hand. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video here at MTG Scoundrels. We'll be back next week with more modern content. Thank you again for watching. We hope you have a wonderful week.